First of all, thank you all so much for giving us some of your time this afternoon. Hopefully what we're establishing now with this pattern of presentations is a series of forums that we will continue to hold throughout the remainder of this spring semester, and of course as appropriate during the summer for those of us who may be working summer school or here during summer, and then gearing up again pretty consistently in the fall. So I guess what I'm asking you to do is recognize that the periodic forums like this for informational updates are going to be part of our steady diet of ongoing communication with each other regarding campus-wide knowledge and understanding about accreditation. I'd like to make a couple of quick acknowledgments. It's the middle of the day and lots of things going on, but we always appreciate when some of our College of the Sequoias board members are able to take time off from either their work or their other responsibilities and join us. So I'd like to acknowledge board member John Zumwalt for being here today. I also think out there, thank you, John. I also think out there in either Tulare or Hanford, there may be other dignitaries attending, and I believe that our board president, Lori Cardoza, is attending with the group in Tulare today and watching this live on the video stream. We also want to ask for your thoughts and prayers for board member Earl Mann. You may not have heard, but he was admitted to the hospital under emergency conditions a few days ago. There's good news. He did go in feeling some angina and pain in his heart, and when they got to the source of the problem, he was experiencing some arrhythmia, but it was coming from pain caused by problems with his gallbladder. So once they got the pain under control and his heart condition stable, they were able to successfully do gallbladder surgery, and he's recovering from that at Cahuilla Delta. So we're happy for Earl. But you know how dedicated Earl is. He called over and left a phone message for me. That's why he wasn't going to be at the forum today. Okay, I mentioned this, but I want to reiterate. We do have, oh, and just joining us, thank you, Tim, just joining us, come on down, Ken, is our board member from Tulare, Ken Nunez. Thank you for being here, Ken. We appreciate you coming. We are video streaming today, and we are able to view this presentation both at our Hanford Center and our Tulare College Center. And we welcome all of you who are watching us in both Hanford and Tulare, and thank you for tuning in today. We're going to be sharing some information at the beginning of today's forum, and then we're going to be collecting and trying our very best to respond to questions. In order to be able to do that efficiently, we're going to be providing cards for you to write down any questions that you may have during any part of the presentation. We have our runners coming around. I'd like to thank Amy and Megan and Karen and Annette from our office who will be moving up and down the aisles, both distributing cards and picking those up. If you have questions from Hanford or Tulare, we're live on chat with you right now. If you would enter those questions into chat, we have a tech person in the back taking those questions. We'll be writing them onto cards and providing them into the input as well. When we get finished with the informational presentation, we'll be able to start taking those questions one at a time, and we'll kind of assemble a panel of us up here to try and respond to your questions, those of us who are going to be presenting today on the information that we're ready to share. So with that, I think I'll move into our agenda. We have two key topics that we wanted to share with you today. Two of our subgroups have been working very diligently. All of the subgroups have been working very diligently, but two of the subgroups have information prepared to share with you today. The first comes from our standard subgroup, working on standard number 4. And standard number 4 deals with the institutional efficiency and effectiveness. And under that topic, we are specifically working on a governance and decision-making manual and model protocol for us to use at College of the Sequoias. Second part of the presentation will be from our subgroup standard number 1 committee working on integrated planning and program evaluation at College of the Sequoias, and representatives from that group will also be sharing a model for that integrated planning. These have been through multiple drafts, and today is one more opportunity to share them as a draft. None of this is etched in stone yet, although it's kind of setting in wet cement now as it's making its way through the process. These are all available to you in the information that we sent to you online. So you have an opportunity either to respond today or to ask questions today or to provide input today. Or if you're more comfortable or you're one of those people who are reflective and you think about it afterwards, you have the opportunity to email in any input that you would like to any members of our subgroup committees that you may be comfortable communicating with. Okay, so the first order of business today is to go through some slides that explain to you the work that we've been doing in subgroup standard number 4, governance and decision making at College of the Sequoias. And I happen to be one of the members on that particular subcommittee, and I'd like to acknowledge our other committee members very quickly. Matt Beret is here today, and he'll be presenting actually a fair amount of this information. But we also have on our committee Kevin McCusker, we have Stephen Meyer, we have Josh Muller, we have Dr. Thea Trimble, and we have Steve Natoli. And this group has worked together. I want to actually commend all of them. They've worked together beautifully, and many times my schedule doesn't allow me to be either at every meeting or to be able to finish every meeting before I have to move on to something else. So I really want to thank my fellow committee members for the heavy lifting they've done in preparing this part of our response so far. So with that, Matt, I'm going to introduce you and allow you to work through the slides.
All right, well, thank you. I am Matt Beret. I'm going to I'm going to try to do my best to walk through the governance handbook that we've been working on for the past 2 to 3 weeks. So governance and decision making at College of the Sequoias 2013 is what we've titled the document. It's about 25 pages long, and it kind of lays out so that everybody can understand how governance is going to work in the future at COS. We kind of started with some principles of participatory governance, and the first one was mutuality, collegiality, and collaboration. We wanted everybody to know that we wanted to work together as a campus, as a community, to solve the problems of governance at COS. We wanted to know that any problem that arises for COS is welcomed to help be solved by anybody at COS. So we wanted to make sure that one of our principles was inclusiveness. We also wanted to make sure that we had transparency. Right? We wanted to make sure we had open and honest, transparent communications across the campus. We didn't want any of the decisions being made behind the scenes, behind closed doors, unless legally they were required to be. Right? So all the governance issues at COS should be done in an open and honest manner. Right? And again, we just emphasized everyone who will be impacted by a decision is encouraged to be involved in the recommendations. So either through senators, through participation at the District Governance Senate, formerly known as College Council, through some venue, you can make your voice known. Another principle of participatory governance is representative participation. See if I can get through this. We wanted to make sure that those people that stepped up to represent a constituency on campus knew what their responsibilities were going to be taking on that job. Right? You're expected to attend the meetings. Right? We all know that one. But going further than that, that you're expected to communicate back to your constituency any findings or results that came from those governance meetings. Right? That you are a go-to for the constituency you represent to bring issues forward to those governance groups and to communicate back to them. So we wanted to make sure that the role of every representative was clearly laid out. Mutual accountability, right? So this principle refers to the importance of members of the various constituent groups adhering to the roles and following through on their responsibilities. So in the full document, it lays out the role of the board, the role of the president, superintendent, the role of the academic senate in making all of these governance decisions. Right? So just to lay it out so everybody knows where their place is. What issues should they be tackling and what issues perhaps they should not be tackling. You know, it falls under another group's purview. And if you want to make recommendations on that, use that group to make those recommendations. But just to lay out where the kind of boundaries are so that we all kind of work on the tasks that we're intended to work on to get as much done as possible. Oh, I think I skipped ahead. Clarity of roles was part of that as well. So, now I need to read this one. So, basically laying out what this document is supposed to do. All right, and the first thing we decided to tackle is the governance structure at COS. When our group started meeting, oh, I hit my button. You guys memorized the picture, right? You guys didn't need it anymore? No. So the first thing we tackled as a group is laying out what the governance structure was going to look like. Those decision-making bodies on campus. Now, in a few slides, we'll talk about the bodies that make recommendations. There's a lot more groups on campus that have input on making recommendations, but we wanted to look at the governance structure first. And we decided on the term Senate for one of the three main bodies that make these governance decisions. And that was the District Governance Senate, which is currently the College Council, the Academic Senate, and the Student Senate, part of the ASB. Right? Those three groups legally have responsibilities in this governance structure. Okay? And then below each of those senates, reporting to their respective senates, are committees. So we're kind of trying to use the term committee to refer to a group that reports to one of these three senates. Right? Now there's other groups on campus that make recommendations as well. And those are going to be referred to as operational groups. Right? So we then looked at, okay, we've got our governance structure kind of laid out, but there's other important groups that do important work on campus and have responsibilities to make recommendations. And we broke it down into three basic categories. The first was the governance groups, the senates and the committees. The second was the operational groups, councils was the term that we want to use for those operational groups. Instructional council, right? What being the one that comes to mind first, but the management council, help me guys, Student Services Hiring Council, did I get that one right? Dean's Council. And all of these groups can make recommendations as well, but they don't have a legal responsibility in the governance process. They're enormously important to the work done at COS, but they're not necessarily part of the governance structure. And then the last one are to deal with issues that come up in the short term, like accreditation. Right? And task force was the term that we gave those. So if an issue comes up that needs an immediate response in a short amount of time, right, the board, the president, or one of the senates would appoint a task force to take action on that. With the idea that once the job is completed for the task force, it's dissolved. It's done. And if another issue comes up, another task force will be created. Now, in the governance book, there's going to be a couple of task forces that are going to show up on a routine basis. A task force will be appointed once every 3 years to look at the mission statement for the college. And that's one that's going to happen on a routine basis. There's going to be another task force appointed once every 10 years for the master plan. So, and those are going to happen in a cycle. But once the master plan is updated, the task force is going to dissolve. 10 years later, a new task force made of different people will come together to tackle it again. Was there anything you wanted to add, Stan? I kind of blew through that.
I think you did it perfect.
So. Thank you, and I will now turn it over to Christian and Jennifer.
Okay, so Christian and I are going to talk about the work that subgroup standard 1 has been working on integrated, on integrated planning at College of the Sequoias. And so, yeah, he messed up. And so I want to talk about, we're on that subgroup along with Christian co-chairs with Cindy Delane and Dave Bird, Ryan Barry Souza, Stephanie Collier, and John Barano are all on that group with us. So I really want to thank them because we've been doing a lot of work. So historically, what I want to tell you, let's look first at the recommendation. This is a recommendation that came from the our report. That basically what the committee saw, that came out, saw that we have really good groups, we have really good organizations, we have good structures in place, but they weren't linked to each other. So that was the biggest area of concern, is you're doing planning in silos, but it doesn't link so well to each other. So that's what this group undertook, was addressing those issues. Now, when I say that, several months ago, right after the self-evaluation team, or our team, visiting team left, there were several of us who got together and said, you know, we've never really talked about planning, so we're all kind of doing similar things, but we've never gotten together. So the Institutional Planning and Effectiveness Committee, the Program Review Committee, the Senate Executive Board, our Research Advisory Committee, and our Outcomes and Assessment Committee all got together, and we had 2 planning summits. And we actually came up with a draft of this model. And then over the last several weeks, while Dr. Eva Conrad was here, we revised it and worked on it. And so we're going to go through that with you now, but also to let you know that we are working on a manual. We got the first draft this week, and so we'll be sharing that with you in the next couple of weeks. So I'm going to let Christian talk about the standards.
All right, so as Jennifer said, we did have a lot of existing components within a formal integrated planning model. The linkages just didn't seem to be there. There were a couple of things that we had to develop, and we identified those in the planning summits that were just referenced. So what I would like to kind of walk you guys through is how we decided to link things up, and we really used the standards in developing this model, the accreditation standards, I mean, in order to figure out where pieces fit into this integrated planning model kind of puzzle here. Starting with standards 1A3 and 1A4, which speak to where the mission should be within the overall planning process. And it's very clear, the mission should be central to what we do in planning at the College of the Sequoias. And what you can see here is how we've put the mission at the top, and putting the mission at the top comes straight from standard 1A4. Another document that is kind of being developed in parallel right now, which is our integrated planning manual, if you will, or integrated planning at the College of the Sequoias 2013, more formally, has a lot more detail than this graphic is going to be able to convey. But within that document, one of the things that we've tried to include is the fact that our mission is actually going to go through a 3-year formal planning cycle. So every 3 years, a particular governance group will initiate a review of the mission, and that comes straight from standard 1A3. This is something that we need to do if we're going to be in compliance with these standards. The next standard I wanted to mention, or at least part of it, is 1B2. And in 1B2, we see that we have to have a couple of elements. We need to have, it speaks of goals and objectives. And what we've tried to do is incorporate this language straight from the standards into our planning process. Goals are going to mean something very, very specific here at the College of the Sequoias once this plan is adopted. Goals are going to be very long-term in nature, first of all. Second of all, goals are, to understand what a goal is, it's really maybe easiest to understand what a goal isn't. And what goals don't do is they don't have timelines associated with them. They don't assign responsibility, but they're sort of the broad, they set direction for the college in a very broad sense. And those goals are going to be included in our planning model at the level of the COS master plan, which is ultimately going to be derived from 2 existing plans that we have, the educational master plan and the facilities master plan. So this COS master plan is something that we already had in place. We also already had a mission in place. So these are 2 things that did not have to be created from whole cloth. They already existed at the college. These objectives that are mentioned in the standard will be integrated in our overall planning model at the level of the strategic plan. Objectives have a couple of characteristics that distinguish them from goals, and that is, importantly, they do have responsibilities associated with them. Certain groups or individuals will be tasked with having the responsibility of fulfilling or completing the objective. They also have timelines associated with them, and resources. So resources, timelines, and responsibilities are all associated with these things that we're going to be calling objectives. And these objectives are more medium term. So the strategic plan will be revised and reviewed, every 5 or 6 years? Or every 3 years? Okay, so every 3 years, the strategic plan will be revised, and along with it, the objectives of the college. There's another kind of level of action, and we call them actions, that are going to be integrated into our planning process, and this is going to happen at the level of the institutional program review. Actions are binary in nature. You either do them or you don't. They're either completed or not completed, and so that's essentially how they are differentiated from goals and objectives. Objectives are measurable. Actions are also measurable, but they're measurable in different ways. We measure actions by either finding out if they have been done or not. It's not a matter of degrees, as it might be with an objective. Moving on to the next standard, 1B3. This standard actually references the fact that all of this planning needs to take place inside a formal cycle of events, right? So planning needs to be cyclical. We don't just make plans and forget about them. We have to revisit them. We have to come back to them. And we have to tie them to resource allocation and implementation. So you see resource allocation down here. So resources need to be allocated based on the rationale provided in one of these other two levels higher up in the planning process. Once resources are allocated to achieve objectives or accomplish actions, then the plan needs to be implemented. Once the plan is implemented, and this is where we get into part of the cycle, we've actually been doing all of this stuff all along. The part that we are going to have to really work on developing are these next two steps. We're going to have to make sure that we not only assess whether or not the achievement of these actions were effective, but we also have to figure out if additional resources may need to be allocated, maybe fewer resources need to be allocated, but this idea of reevaluation needs to be incorporated into our plan. And where that happens most formally will be in the one part of this integrated planning model that did not exist until we met with Dr. Conrad and had these conversations. This is something new to the planning process that did not exist, which will be the annual college report on the master plan, where those questions will be asked. We will ask, to what degree have the objectives in the strategic plan been achieved? And we'll ask, to what degree did the actions identified in the institutional program reviews contribute to the achievement of those objectives? And then within the 10-year cycle, we'll also be using this information to revise and reevaluate our strategic plan, resetting our goals. I'm sorry, the master plan. Central to this entire process, and this comes from standard 1B3, needs to be the analysis of data. We need to use data to drive these decisions. Decisions whether or not actions actually help accomplish objectives, that needs to be established through the analysis of data. Now, it's important. I think a lot of us, when we hear the word data, we automatically think of numbers, but the standard's really clear on this. It's not just quantitative data. It's not just how many butts are in seats. It's also qualitative data that needs to be brought to bear in this process of analysis. So in here, we have data analysis, and you can see how central it is to all of the other parts of the integrated planning model. So what we're attempting to accomplish in the development of this graphic is basically two things. We want to be able to communicate those links that we failed to communicate between all these processes to the visiting team when they come to reevaluate us in October. But we also want to do one last thing. Whoops, maybe I skipped ahead here. Yeah, we also want to be able to ensure that this process is ongoing to ourselves, right? I don't know about you, but the way things work at my house is if we have vague plans to, I don't know, clean the garage, it never gets done. But when we put it down onto paper and my wife tells me, you need to get this done this weekend, well, anyway, it helps me. I don't know if it helps you guys, but it helps me be a good husband. And I think that there is a parallel here with this model, that if we just have a vague notion that we're going around doing these things, it's going to be just that. It's going to be vague. We're not really going to know if we are actually using data to make these decisions, if we're actually reevaluating our mission, if we're actually trying to figure out if the actions that are taking place at our unit level is helping the college to achieve its objectives from the strategic plan. I mean, we may have a sense that it's getting done, and I'm a good liar. I lie to myself all the time. I've been cleaning that garage. I know it. I took something out and put it in the garbage or something like that, but it never really actually gets done. At least that's been my experience. And the last thing that really needs to be in place by the time the visiting team returns and visits the college is that we need to be able to communicate to them not only that we have these links on paper, but that these links are real and are part of our culture, right? We need to be able to explain to them what this whole thing means and why the mission is at the top of the model, and why we have these arrows that seem to go in this circular fashion, and why data is in the middle with a bunch of dotted lines going out to the different elements of the plan. This is something that we have to be able to communicate, and not with just the visiting team, but with each other. If we're going to work collaboratively, we need to start by all understanding what we're doing together. So I think at this point, Jennifer is going to wrap things up.
Yeah. And thanks, Christian. Great job. And that was one of the things that Dr. Conrad was really clear with us about, is that if we have a new president or a new vice president or a new Senate president or a new student Senate president, that we're able to hand them both of these documents and say, this is how it works at College of Sequoias. Not that a new person can come in and change it. This is how we do things. So we're going to go through the process over the next few weeks of adopting both of these models. So from here, everyone received today in the morning in your email from Superintendent Carasosa a copy of the governance manual, a copy of this model, and the description of this model. And in the next 2 weeks, we'll be getting you the manual that goes through this model. So as was mentioned, send your feedback to those of us that you've seen here, those of us we mentioned are in the groups. Both of these documents will be going forward to the Academic Senate on April 24th. They'll be going forward in a special College Council meeting that's been added on April 30th, and then we expect to have both of them to the board in May. So we really need your feedback as soon as possible on these. In addition, what Christian mentioned is really important. Once this is adopted by everybody, then it becomes our mantra for the next few months. Because when the visiting team comes in November, if they approach any one of us, we want to be able to explain governance and planning at COS, what those look like, and that we can each explain this model and what it looks like. So those are really key, that we're prepared to do that in November. Now, we wouldn't have maybe gone through a whole cycle, but at least we know what the plan is for the year and how it's laid out for the year. Okay, so if you guys, and we're going to have Michelle come up now, and she's going to talk about the role of Senate and what Senate's working on. And if you can start writing any questions you have on the cards and passing them to the aisles, then we'll come forward and answer them. And next is Michelle.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi, I just want to remind everybody that you have an invitation in your email to go to the Accreditation Summit, April the 27th, which is a Saturday. It's one of 2 accreditation summits, so if you can't make it to that one, we hope you can make it to the May 7th one. We'll be starting at 8:30 and we'll go until 2 p.m. Lunch is provided, and that's why we kind of need you to RSVP, hopefully before April the 22nd. The Senate has 3 goals for this particular summit. that all those who attend will understand the work that is being done by the 5 response task force subcommittees in relationship to planning, campus dialogue, and the evaluation of processes. So we've pulled out the 3 main recommendations. We hope for a wide and varied audience of faculty, classified, administration, and community members. Our second goal is that we want to collaborate and give feedback in small groups after very brief presentations by the subcommittees. So don't think it's going to be all the subcommittees telling you what's going on. We really need your feedback. We've built in a lot of time. We need to know what's going right and what still needs to be done. Our third goal is to provide time for crosstalk among the subcommittees. We worry that we still prefer to work in our individual silos, so the subcommittees will be staying an extra hour. They'll stay until 3. And then on Tuesday, May the 7th, it'll be from 5 to 8 p.m., and both of these, due to the fact that we don't know how many people are coming, we're going to have to wait until we see the numbers to give you the room, but we will. This will be the second and last accreditation summit, and these will be recommendations on student learning outcomes. Student learning outcomes is the largest recommendation, and that's why we'll have the 5 subcommittees giving their brief overview, and then again we'll want feedback from everybody to fill in any gaps and give commendations to those that have worked so hard. So we hope you'll come. We hope you'll RSVP soon. If you have any questions, you can contact myself or Thea Trimble. And now it's to discussion, I believe. Yes?
Okay, the protocol for this, because we do have viewers from both Hanford and Tulare, is that we're going to be taking your questions, hopefully, that you've submitted on cards, questions or comments that we can answer for you. We'll bring them up here. We're going to repeat them. We're going to read them and repeat them so that our viewers can hear those and be clear, if you're watching in from Tulare or Hanford, what the question is. And then we'll be sharing amongst ourselves to the best of our ability to provide clarification and responses. So if you have questions, and you could send those to the end of the aisle, we've got folks who will come by and pick those up. And Brent's going to be shuttling them to us. Okay. First question, what are the significant differences between the old and new principles of participatory governance? I can, and then you join and help me, okay, Matt? I think the principles are fairly consistent. I don't think there are significant differences between the principles, other than we have clearly tried to delineate what legal authority is and where it lies, what recommendation authority is as opposed to decision making, and then what participation authority is as opposed to feeding into a recommendation. So the principles of participatory decision making, I believe we've tried to live by the spirit of those, but we haven't done it as effectively in the past as we hope to be able to do it in the future. Would you add anything to that, Matt, in terms of differentiating? Okay. Okay, a couple of these deal with board policy and administrative procedures. First is, won't the administrative procedures and board policies still allow a new president to come in and make substantive changes? In terms of the planning and or decision making, do you guys want to respond to that? APs and BPs, wouldn't they still allow a new president to come in and make substantive changes?
Well, I think there is room within the cycle. I think there is room within the cycle, and in fact, these are not meant to be. These are meant to be living documents, right? So, in reviewing the standards, I think what's been really clear is that we don't just write these down and then never improve them or change them. But I think the important thing is that a new president, although they would have room to change these processes, they would be moving through something that had been codified and something that was transparent and something that would allow people to have expectations or reasonable expectations about how to participate or be involved in those changes. And I don't think that's something that has necessarily existed at COS before. So yeah, we're expecting these documents to change. But what I think is really different and what I'm kind of excited about is if there's some change that's going on, I'll know where I can step in and have my voice be heard and where that it will be most effectively communicated.
Yeah, I would just add to that if you envision two things, the planning diagram that was up there, and then the breakdown of the decision-making groups, a new president may come in, a new academic senate president may be elected, but neither of them individually have unilateral authority to change anything in that process. Changes in that process would have to be a result of having come through that process. So there would be opportunities for review, presentation, committee, feedback, input, recommendations, and then changes. And then ultimately still opportunities for the board to take action on any proposed changes. And that leads us to the second of these two board policy type questions. This one says, will the board, meaning our College of the Sequoias Board of Trustees, be willing to withdraw or undo Board Policy 2510? For those of you who don't know what Board Policy 2510 is, it's the current board policy and administrative procedure that we have that defines local participation in decision making. And recently there has been a proposed revision which is now the majority of the way through acceptance, which has very clearly stated what the elected Board of Trustees' legal responsibility and authority is in terms of making decisions on behalf of the college. And this asks, what gives the board carte blanche in the decision making? This will make the planning and decision making model more valid. I understand the point of view here. What I can tell you is that the recent changes to the board policy to make it more clear and clearly delineate the board's final responsibility and authority is in response to the accreditation recommendation we have. Now, if that ruffles your feathers a little bit, so be it. But the reality is that we have a set of legal responsibilities that fall with the elected board of officials that none of the rest of us have the authority to do. And so this clarifies that in the law. So the only thing that's in Board Policy 2510 is what's legally the board's responsibility and authority. And I really don't think it's as important how it's written as is how it operates. And so we need to hold each other accountable for making sure that that operates in an appropriate manner. Okay, next set of questions. It says, when are we going to start using the planning model, and how do we know if it will be sustained over the next 5 or 10 years?
Planning.
Okay.
So the planning model is currently still under development. I mean, part of this forum that we're having here today is to get more feedback into the development of the planning model. The plan for the planning model is to have it through the participatory governance process by the end of this year and begin its implementation in fall of 2013. So that's the plan.
And then we will at convocation, fall convocation is when we'll do training, we'll discuss it, we'll have pictures of it, we'll tattoo it on our arms, however it is, but we'll be getting all that information and make sure everybody has an understanding of it. Yes?
And the document that we're currently working on is a manual to go along with that graphic. And within that manual, there are timelines for every single one of those boxes that you saw in there. So it'll say what happens in August of 2013 and every 3 years thereafter. And that will happen every 3 years after 2013. So once we have more work done, I think we'll be able to answer that question a little bit more clearly, but it's getting done, and it'll be to you pretty soon.
Okay, we have a couple questions here about relationships and climate. The first asks, how are we addressing, in quotes, campus climate? Given that the team will be here in October, is there enough time to appropriately address this concern? I'll I'll add a response and then invite any of you to add thoughts or comments that you might have. I've had a number of conversations around this kind of question with a variety of different folks, and some of you have heard me share my response to this already, but I think the idea of campus dialogue and campus climate, as it's been referenced in our accreditation report, is not going to the source problem, it's speaking to a symptom. Bad climate comes as a result of other things. And I think what we've experienced at College of the Sequoias is some of the disconnects in the past between how planning processes work, how communication is delivered, and how decision-making is arrived at. And our hope, I think, as we've all worked on this, is that by putting in a system that's built with integrity, meaning it has transparency, it has checks and balances, it's clear. People know these are the things I have the authority to provide input and recommendations on, and these are the things that I have the authority to make the final decisions on. And these are the things that I can participate in, and these are the things that are not my purview to participate in. And there are some limits. I mean, the truth is we can't all be involved in everything because of laws, code, regulations, etc. But I think having a system that's built on that kind of transparency, that has checks and balances in so that there's no secrets, no more handshake deals, no more backdoor arrangements, no more wondering how something came about, that is the infrastructure of a foundation for positive climate. Positive climate, I hope, we realize doesn't mean that we always get our way, that we always get the decision we want. If that was the measure of positive climate, none of us would live in a positive climate. So what positive climate, I hope, should represent is that we're clear on how things are discussed, how decisions are made, how resources are allocated. We have an opportunity to participate in that process and watch it play out to its end. And then in the end, we're an institution. We work together, we pull together, we try to implement to the very best of our ability. And evaluate, and if necessary, make a change the next time around based on whether or not something worked. Our hope is that by putting these structures in place, we're going to get to the source of what has been a climate problem, which is ambiguity, some confusion. I think that breeds mistrust. I think that creates opportunity for misinformation. And the more that we can structurally fix that, the better we're going to be. Anything you guys want to add?
Yeah, just to reinforce what you said, the campus climate recommendation, I think, it's really, you can get a lot of insight into maybe what the visiting team was talking about. If you actually look at the recommendations and the standards that were referenced in association with that recommendation on campus climate, it was Standard 1, which is planning, Standard 3, which is resource allocation, and Standard 4, which is governance. So the way the visiting team's report was written, I think they expected us to address that problem of campus climate within the framework of those three standards, and I think that's exactly what Stan was saying earlier. We need these processes, you know, so that we don't have to wonder and come up with stories about how things have gotten done. We can know how things have gotten done. Yep.
Well, one thing I would just like to say about campus climate, and kind of paraphrasing something that Frank Thibault said at Academic Senate, is the climate will improve when we choose to improve it. So it's up to us. Every individual, whether it's administration, confidential, classified, faculty, or student, we can work within our sphere of influence to improve things. So if we all do that together, right, we can make the climate overall better. And the documents being created are just a venue for us to express what we want done to improve things at COS in a kind of collegial way where everybody's voice can be heard respectfully. But we have to choose.
Matt doesn't know it, but he's starting a political career right here before your eyes. The next question along those lines of openness and transparency says, where does the transparency and openness come in into the senior management group? And are there minutes and agendas, and can individuals be present if they wish? Contrary to whatever popular rumor may be, or legend or lore, senior management is not some behind-the-door, smoke-filled room set of decisions. It's a group of senior managers titled as such under what our positions are responsible for and accountable to under the law and the Education Code, and we meet every Thursday. We meet every Thursday morning in the PCR. It's about a 2.5 to 4 hour meeting. We have an ongoing agenda of activities that we work on that really deal with every aspect of our responsibilities in terms of management and governance for the entire campus and for the entire college system, including Tulare and Hanford. It includes our 3 vice presidents, our president. It includes the dean of human resources, because ongoing issues are related to personnel and they involve HR, and it includes the provosts from our 2 campuses, because they serve as the site administrators for operation of those campuses. There is confidential information that has to be discussed there. It's a function of our jobs. So there are things, like I said before, transparency isn't 100% and it isn't perfect. So the unfortunate reality, or what we might like to say, the fortunate reality is, over time we have to build some trust in each other. We have to understand that there's a reason why the Academic Senate has an executive committee that holds meetings of that executive committee alone. There's a reason why, if I'm COSTA or CSEA, I might have an executive board of my association that has the right and responsibility to convene a meeting of that executive board alone. Because there's business that's appropriate under the guise of those respective organizations to address in that setting. And then from there should be decisions and or communication. So what you can find is, if you read the College Council, or what will soon be District Governance Senate minutes, are reports that the President gives on a regular basis on the agendas and the minutes associated with senior management to what will be our District Governance Senate or College Council. The controversy, I guess, since I arrived among some about senior management is that it used to be a hybrid group. It used to have association presidents. It used to have academic senate president. It mixed our groups. In one model, you would think that's very inclusive. That's fantastic. If I'm the CSEA president and I get to sit in senior management, I can raise a question about anything that I think may be a problem and try to head it off at the pass. But what if your definition of a problem is different than ours? Then we've built in a controversy. Or what if your definition of a problem is different than a definition of a problem that might be raised by the COSTA union organization? So there's opportunities for the interests to overlap and serve a mutual purpose, but there's also respective interests that are separate. And I think the role of us as unions to advocate and support and represent our associations is admirable, perfect, strong, and has a valuable place in our organization. But it's not on the same path as governance and decision-making in accordance with the California Education Code. They're separate. No less important, just different. And so in the case of senior management, there's responsibilities that the administration bears. Confidential, legal, personnel-related, and finance-related that are not the purview of anybody else other than senior managers. That's what they're entrusted with. The rest of our decision-making should be reflected as it makes its way through that process. And if we're operating with consistency and integrity, you're going to see that in the outcomes of our decisions. And if not, I have no doubt this group will hold us accountable. Of course.
Yeah, okay. I'm just wondering if the governance manual might not help delineate what Senior Management Council does and maybe does not do, and so therefore maybe that would alleviate some people's misgivings, and maybe you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, thank you, Christian. It does. When you read the text in the manual that goes along with the chart that Matt showed, senior management will be listed there with its purpose, its function, its role, its responsibility, and its limits. Just like the other councils, it's an operational committee really by our definition. It meets weekly to manage decisions in the processing of our organization. And we don't have any power more than anyone else, with the exception of finalizing recommendations that go to our elected board, which is why we've been so clear in trying to delineate what our elected board's responsibilities and authorities are in the development of our policies. So you will see that in our manual. This is a question called in on chat from Hanford. It says, can you talk about the difference in the title Student Senate versus our current associated student body? You want to give that a crack, Matt? Okay. When Matt spoke earlier about us tying the term Senate in those 3 organizational boxes across that governance and decision-making chart, it was to reference that Senate is the term used in the education code for legal authority given to the academic senate. So we believed it was good to be consistent by calling a district governance senate, and many of us have heard about colleges who have a student senate. In terms of how they're different than an associated student body model, I think they're very similar. I think the structure of a senate is more collegiate and less pre-secondary than associated student body. It separates us. I think it elevates them to a little bit higher level of sophistication. And I think what it gives us the opportunity now in this model is to describe how representatives from Student Senate who serve on other governance decision-making committees, what the role is that they'll play. I just happened to be speaking to our student government this morning. And what I explained to them is this, that right now we have at least 2 student reps who come from ASB to sit on what's currently our college council. They're fabulous members. They attend more regularly than most. They report on student matters that come up, and they engage in discussion about student issues. What I haven't seen us do as effectively as we will in the future is more deeply engage them as representatives of their group. It goes back to that responsibility slide that Matt showed us for representatives. So what I shared with our students this morning is, here's how a normal cycle we hope works in the future. College Council currently goes every 2 weeks. That will be our District Governance Senate. It meets every 2 weeks. Week 1, we may have an item on the agenda about proposed increases in student parking permit fees for next year. The first time it's on District Governance agenda, it's going to be there for information with all the rationale. Here's the data behind it. Here's the police chief's recommendation. Here's where the new funding from that money would go into a budget to fix lighting, improve parking lots, etc. So everybody has all the information. Students get an opportunity to take that in and understand, here's why the college is proposing an increase in student parking permit fees. That meeting, it's only for information. No action's being taken. So what I do is we look over at our student reps and we say, now, the next time we meet in 2 weeks, this is going to be before the Governance Senate for action. You need to go back, get it onto your Student Senate agenda, present the information to Student Senate, and use your governance process to collectively come up with what you want your representative vote to be. And then authorize your 2 members to come back in 2 weeks at the Governance Senate representing you and cast those votes on behalf of our students. That's a level of sophistication greater than we're operating right now, and we're excited about the opportunity to elevate our student engagement in that way. And that could happen on a number of different kinds of decisions. Okay, I love this question. Accreditation is not short-term. Should there be, or is there going to be, some sort of an accreditation council or something that will go beyond the task force designation? The idea that accreditation is not an event, it's a way of life.
He hands it to me. Yeah. So when you look in the district governance and decision-making model, it is addressed there. The Institutional Planning and Effectiveness Committee that I currently co-chair with the Vice President of Academic Senate, that group is charged with accreditation. And so we will be working regularly on accreditation. And so one of the things we've talked about is that accreditation just isn't on the board agendas or the college council agendas or the Senate agendas when we're undergoing a visit. It's going to be a regular part of every meeting, that there's constantly an update on accreditation. The other thing, as we look at the models though, as Christian, as we did in our slides, every part of our planning model is tied to standards and accreditation. So we're actually, through these changes, going to be living and breathing accreditation on a daily basis. And our goals for next year is to do, and whatever time we have left this year, is to do a lot of training on what the accreditation standards are and how those connect to our daily lives. So I think through this process, that's where we're going to be, and it's going to be constant. COS will just be, that's our living, breathing, daily routine.
Yeah, I think the old model of going through any kind of a cyclical accreditation kind of lent itself toward that accreditation being an event. We got ready, it happens once every 6 years, right? We get some information leading up, the year before we go through accreditation, we get some information leading up to that. We select a group of people, mostly it's those who volunteer, raise their hands, come forward. We get some people on some reassigned time to work on a report. Everybody hunkers down and tries to do a comprehensive report and get it all ready. And then the following fall, the visiting team is scheduled to come. About 2 weeks or a month before they get here, we start holding some meetings. Pretty frantically, we start holding up the diagrams and the charts, and we give everybody a t-shirt and a slogan. So when they get here and they talk to you, this is what we're doing on accreditation. And we all kind of get dressed up for Thanksgiving. And then we have dinner, and then we chase it with some Lipitor, and then all of a sudden dinner's over, Thanksgiving is over, and guess what? How many other times during the year do we cook a turkey? Not too often. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to remove accreditation from being an event, and just as these folks have shared with you today, if we organize how we operate every day around the standards for accreditation, we're just living it. When they come, when we get ready to do a report, it's not going to be that big arduous task. It's going to be us collecting the data we use all the time, compiling it and say, come and look at how we monitor ourselves and do our work. We operate like this because these are good practicing standards. It's not going to be an event. So we're hopeful and a little less nervous about accreditation falling off in the future based on how we're trying to put together our responses now. We want to build it to last. We don't have any other cards submitted for questions at this time. Are there any other questions that any of you wanted to make sure you asked today? Could you hold your card up and we'll come around to pick them up? Okay, if not, do we have any final announcements or information from the group? I do want to say that, again, this is the latest in a series of forum updates and information. I know that many of you are regulars here. We appreciate that a lot. I hope some of you are here for the first time today and getting information and will continue to come back. Please share what you're learning here and what you're hearing here. The more that we can talk about it, the more that we can communicate effectively about it, and the more that we can bring people continually back to the forums. It's just one tool, but it's a valuable tool for us to share information. Remember, everything that we've sent you via email is open for your input and feedback. You can email any of us. We all work on those subgroups, and we will all take that information into the process. Okay, without any further ado, this session is adjourned. Thank you.